This chapter of middle game decisions will be devoted to minor sacrifices ideas. What do I want to say with minor sacrifices? This is a pawn, maybe two pawns, maybe an exchange. Why is it important? Because somehow minor sacrifices are always easier than these, what I would call capital sacrifices. Somehow in my career, I did not sacrifice too many pieces, but I sacrificed plenty of pawns, or sometimes in exchange. Because if you feel that the position is right and you sacrifice a pawn or two, or maybe an exchange, you are not really sacrificing a house. So you are not, your risk is considerably lower. And here I have selected a number of examples of those kind of sacrifices and, well, aim which you are trying to achieve. So I will start with one example. This is game between Yusupov and Ivanchuk. The game has been played in Tal Memorial, Riga, 1995. And let's start off with the opening moves. This is Queen's Gambit accepted. d4, d5, knight of 3, e6, c4, d takes c4, e3, a6, bishop c4, c5. Obviously, white has all sorts of different variations here. Bishop b3 was Yusupov choice. Knight f6, castles. Black here has various main moves. Perhaps move b5 is the most played one. But here Ivanchuk is choosing knight c6, also often played move. Queen e2, c takes d4, rook d1. And here Ivanchuk does not want to play isolated pawn position. Obviously he can play move bishop e7 and after e takes d4, because in such a positions, obviously if you would like to play without isolated pawn to take by rook, it doesn't make too much sense because position is completely equal. So if you want advantage, you need to play with isolated pawn either here and then to develop your knight to c3 and play this kind of position, or even what most people do, ed4, castles, knight c3, and just hope to have advantage in this isolated pawn position, which, well, white has reasonable chances to get, and black has to be careful that pawn break d5 does not come at the wrong moment. Ivanchuk doesn't want to play this kind of position. He plays move d3. Rook takes d3, queen c7, and now position resembles with the pawn structure actually Furman variation of a Queen's Gambit, when you develop queen early to e2 and then you take with the white on c5 and you get such similar pawn structure. So here rook takes d3, queen c7, knight c3, bishop d6. We have here symmetric pawn structure. So it is quite clear that white, he needs to use his advantage in development, because white does have advantage in development at this particular moment. White did castle, and black yet has to castle. So white has advantage in development, and which white needs to use. If this advantage in development of white evaporates, well, we have symmetrical pawn structure, and a draw will be the most likely result in this game. So Yusupov, given his advantage in development, he takes space, pushing move e4. It is not only that he takes space, but he also generates a threat. Because does he have a threat? Yes, he does have a threat. For example, black, he cannot just castle, because if black castles, white simply can win material. Takes on d6, queen takes, and e5. And white would have two pieces for rook. So, more or less, well, the most, not forced, but the most logical move is move knight to e5 in order to prevent this pawn push. So knight e5, bishop e5. Looks like that Ivanchuk is doing good business, because bishop is strong on e5, and it has prevented a e5 pawn push. And the next move is going to be castle. And looks like that black is doing basically very well. Here Artur Yusupov comes with a dynamic pawn sacrifice aimed to open file, and he plays a beautiful move f4. Try to remember this, because this is a typical pawn sacrifice often seen in similar positions of a queen's gambit accepted, or if you ever get a similar kind of position. f4. White sacrifices a pawn in order to open a file and speed up his development further. Bishop f4, bishop f4, queen f4. And now what white does, and this is probably what Ivanchuk underestimated. Ivanchuk was most probably thinking this is not a big deal because if rook f1, now queen takes a space which bishop was occupying on e5. And what's a big deal? Next move will be castle. Well, black collected a pawn in the process. Life is beautiful. But here Artur Yusupov does a brilliant job. He sacrifices another pawn to open files to black king further and to somehow discoordinate black's pieces. He pushes e5 and after knight e7 plays move rook f1. I really love how Yusupov played this game. Queen takes e5, so Ivanchuk is now 2 pawns up. But now look at those files. Those files are open, rooks are working. Another file. Rook e3. Look what Yusupov did. This is move number 18, so only 4 moves to go we had this position. Or better, maybe even 6 moves to go we had this. Everything symmetrical, everything closed. Only 6 moves later, we have this situation. White sacrificed 2 pawns. Everything is open towards black's king. Beautiful play. Queen d4, trying to use this pin. Rook d1. All goes with the tempo. Queen a7, using this pin so you cannot sacrifice on e6. Now the question is whether or not to play move king h1 immediately or first knight e4. Well, king h1 will need to be played because this rook will need to get away from the pin. Yusupov, I assume that maybe was not clear to him what happens in the case of king h1, knight f6. I think so. This is how somehow it looks to me. So he decided to play move knight e4 first. Well, threat is a check. So castles. And now move king h1. White is 2 pawns down. This is also what Yusupov did. This is intuitive sacrifice. Because there is no forced win here. White is having massive development advantage. And all white pieces are coordinating very well. But obviously, in this position, when he decided to take a decision and to sacrifice 2 pawns in order to open files, Yusupov needed to trust his feeling. He simply needed to trust his feeling that in this position, he will have enough compensation for 2 sacrificed pawns. And this is a beauty of intuitive sacrifice. This is a pure intuitive sacrifice. And he does have actually more than just the compensation. Ivanchuk needs to develop. In order to develop, he needs to move his knight. Well, he cannot move it to too many squares because, well, the beautiful square to move would be c5 in order to trade some pieces. But there is a problem. Well, can you spot the problem if you move knight to c5? The problem is that I would give you a hint. This king has no defenders. What can kill this king? Check. And you cannot take because you will get mated. And if you do not take, well, you don't exactly have a moves because, well, on this move I have various moves. I think I can even take. And then mate along the h-file. So Ivanchuk plays move knight e5. Logical move. He develops the knight And now this knight f6 tactic is not working because knight is coming as a defender to his king. So knight e5, rook h3. Threat is obvious. Threat is a double attack. Queen h5 hitting, or knight and a pawn. So knight g6, queen h5, h6. It looks like that black has managed to somehow keep his stuff together. And somehow that black will manage development, and, well, who knows, these two pawns might become important. How can Yusupov continue his attack with great energy? Knight f6, he continues attack with great energy. G takes f6. Queen h6, threat is mate in 1. Rook e8, only move. And here actually somehow it's a pity. It's a pity that this masterpiece of Yusupov has been spoiled. Artur Yusupov played here move rook g3, and he spoiled his masterpiece, because after queen f2 he had nothing better but to force a draw by perpetual check. Rook g6, fg6, queen g6, king f8, queen h6, king f7, queen h7, and game finished drawn by perpetual check. This is a pity, because in a diagrammed position, instead of move rook g3, he had a much stronger continuation, a forced win. Can you spot this continuation? I would give you a hint. This bishop will play crucial role. At this moment, this bishop is not cooperating as an attacking piece, but it can cooperate and play a crucial role. So how to get it done? First check. King f8. Now look at also all those pieces are totally out of play. Rook f3. Threat is to take and to mate. f5 cannot be played because this bishop is a power. Rook takes f5 and mate on f7. So king e7 only move, unfortunately, for black. Queen g7. By the way, this cannot be allowed. For example, move like a b5 will not help because rook takes, and I threaten queen g6. I also threaten to double, so position is going to collapse. This queen cannot come to rescue on time. So rook f3, king e7, and now I force again the sequence where this bishop is important. So queen g7, and after f5, rook takes f5, and again mate on f7. So I love this game because it is what Yusupov played here. What he did is typical sacrifice, which we can see in similar positions. So first sacrificing one pawn to open one file, and now sacrificing another pawn to open another file, e5. Rook f1, queen takes, rook e3, and conducting the whole attack with absolutely great energy. And it is pity that this masterpiece of Artur Yusupov did not get crowned by victory.